Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Geopolitics. And the question we're asking you today is, has Zelensky's bluff on his million-man army backfired? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Ukrainians initially said that they would launch a counteroffensive in June, sometime in June of this year. Then they said July. Then they said August. In a recent interview, one Ukrainian general, he said that the counteroffensive would have to wait until next year. Now, recently, Zelensky stated that basically the Ukrainian army they had amassed a 1 million man army, and that they were going to launch a counteroffensive to take back Kherson. Alright, now as a result of this, some people said it was a bluff from the beginning, but as a result of this, the Russians sent reinforcements to this area. The Russians already had a defensive line in this area. Some say they had 20,000 troops already lined up in this area, but as a result, they sent, some say, something like 20,000 more troops, just as reinforcements. Now, if they hadn't sent those troops to Kherson, then we would imagine that those troops would have been fighting in the Donbass area. And maybe that explains why the Russians haven't made that much progress in the Donbass lately, in the last couple of weeks. I mean, they have made some progress. You see the blue lines here? So they have made some progress, incremental progress. Some say a little more than this, some say a little less, but yeah, they have made progress, but not as much as I think they would have liked. Now, some say that this was a brilliant bluff on the part of Zelensky, but soon, you know what's funny? Soon after it became apparent that this counteroffensive wasn't going to happen, that it just wasn't going to materialize. Zelensky basically he shuffled a bunch of people around. He fired a bunch of people. He got rid of a bunch of his staff. And some say that was because he was just he was so enraged that this counteroffensive wasn't going to happen. So some say that it was a bluff from the beginning. Some say that Zelensky wanted it to happen, but it didn't happen. But anyways, now there is a potential for this counteroffensive to pretty much blow back. There could be blowback because of this whole million-man army bluff and the counteroffensive bluff, if it was indeed a bluff. Because there were already 20,000 Russian soldiers here, just to defend the lines. Then, as a precaution, the Russians sent 20,000 more. Well, now it's a known fact that it's a bluff. So the Russians have a few options. They can send the 20,000 soldiers, the extra soldiers, from Kherson all the way back to the Donbass. They can do this more or less at once. They can do this incrementally, so they can maybe every couple of days send a couple thousand. Or if they want to be cautious, they could send maybe every couple of days they could send a couple thousand, and they could leave maybe 5,000 soldiers out of the 20,000 here in Kherson, just as a precaution. But then, on the other hand, they have another option. Recently, Ramzan Kadyrov, the leader of the of Chechnya, which is a part of Russia. I'll show you a picture of him right here. Recently, he stated that he was sending, and this was a couple days ago, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, he said that he was sending 20,000 elite Chechen troops to Ukraine. All right? And furthermore, Russia has also been training, from what I've heard, since March. They've been training soldiers to send into Ukraine. They've been mobilizing, not an official mobilization, but they've been basically recruiting and training soldiers to send to Ukraine since March, and ever since March. And so you do the math: March, April, May, June, July, August. So right about now, if the Russian soldiers have gone through 6 months of training, which is standard for a soldier, it's the Ukrainians have been known to train soldiers for days or weeks and then send them to the front lines. But if you want to properly train a soldier, turn a civilian into a soldier, then usually the standard is 6 months for basic training. 6 months of rigorous training. And that's basic training. So you do the math: 20,000 soldiers from Kadyrov, and if Chechnya is able to send 20,000 soldiers, you think about it. Chechnya has a population of 1.4 million. Russia has a population of something like 140 million. So if Chechnya is sending 20,000, many people are guessing that Russia is sending, from March, they've been training at least 50,000 soldiers. So that's 70,000 soldiers. And that brings us to another option. Okay, since this whole million-man army thing was a bluff, the Russians, they could send the 20,000 soldiers, the extra soldiers they've sent here as reinforcements, they could send them to the Donbass. Or here's another option: they could keep them here, and then when the 70,000 soldiers, the 20,000 Chechens and 50,000 Russians are sent into Ukraine. And also recently we saw a video of the Russians sending T-90 tanks, convoys of T-90 tanks on trains into Ukraine. So assuming that these 70,000 soldiers are well armed and well trained, let's say that the Russians decide to keep the 20,000 extra soldiers here in Kherson. And then out of the 70,000, they decide to send, let's say, 35,000 soldiers to the Donbass as reinforcements, and then 35,000 soldiers to Kherson as reinforcements. So 35,000 plus 20,000, that would be around 55,000 soldiers, extra soldiers. Remember, there's 20,000 soldiers defending the line. And now the Russians could potentially have 50,000 or more soldiers just as extras here. Now, some people might be doubting this, but recently what's happened is that the Russians have made some gains around Kherson. And these are not minor gains. And keep in mind, this map is a pro-Ukrainian map. Yesterday, I was looking at the map, and suddenly I saw this symbol. I've just highlighted this in blue just to just to show you, I saw this symbol. I saw this flag, which signifies, it's red, so it signifies the Russians have taken this town or taken this area. The AK signifies that there's fighting along this area as well. But I was surprised because when I initially saw this symbol, the map still looked like this. It looked something like this, and I'll show you. Okay. So it was approximately, the map looked approximately something like this. So you see all this area in red to the west. All this area within this line was blue when this symbol initially showed up. So I was confused. So I was thinking that the Russians just come from the east and take this area, or did they come from the south and the east? Which would mean that if they came from the east, right, and they came from the south, that would mean that they've taken this whole area. This whole area would be encircled. And then a few hours later, this entire map turned, this entire area in question turned red. So the Russians have taken a large chunk of territory, and that reinforces the idea that the Russians and the Chechens have recently sent new equipment and newly trained troops into Ukraine. Now, could this just be the beginning, or was this just the Russians just surging ahead? We don't know yet. But if the Russians do have something like 50,000 extra troops here, then we might see the Russians go on an offensive towards Mikolaiv, and those extra troops that they're sending to the Donbass, we might see some serious progress in the Donbass. If you look at the map, indeed the Ukrainians are fighting back. They're launching rockets and missiles at Russian territory. Recently, they've been launching missiles and drones at at Crimea. But if you look at the big picture, all these blue symbols represent siren alerts, right? So that means that the Russians are more than likely launching missiles at these sites or in this general direction. You see all these siren alerts? So the Russians are launching missiles at Ukraine like there's no tomorrow. And if you look at the big picture, for every Ukrainian, and this is this symbol should be blue, by the way, but because it represents Ukrainians attacking the Russians. But for every Ukrainian attack or explosion on Russian territory, look at how many explosions or attacks or artillery or rocket attacks or whatever there are on Ukrainian territory. It's easily 10 to 1 or 20 to 1. So in the big picture, there's no doubt about it, there's a huge disparity in not only, if you look at the recent gains even, there's a huge disparity in firepower. And anyways, let's look at the other gains the Russians have made lately. So that's the question. Has Zelensky, has his bluff backfired now? But let's look at some other parts of the map. Okay, so this is the Zaporizhia power plant. Again, shelling at the Zaporizhia power plant. The Zaporizhia power plant, the nuclear power plant, is the largest power plant in Europe. It provides 20% of the electricity for Ukraine, for the general vicinity in this area. The reason why there's all this shelling lately is because the Russians were planning on, and I think they're still planning on, what they want to do is they want to cut the electricity going to Ukraine. And by the way, Ukraine sells excess electricity from this power plant to Europe. But anyways, the Russians want to cut this electricity going to Ukraine. And what they want to do is they want to divert the electricity to the Russian-controlled territory, the Russian electrical grid. Basically, all this territory they control to their own electrical grid. So I was hoping the shelling would stop here because, I mean, look, to shell or to attack a nuclear power plant, especially the biggest in Europe, is no joke. And the Western corporate media, they would have us believe that the Russians are shelling their own power plant, nuclear power plant. But you know what, guys? I just don't buy that. I mean, I don't know how naive you would have to be to buy that. It just sounds ridiculous. It's obviously the Ukrainians. They're obviously really upset that they're about to lose all the electricity from this power plant. So they're just continually shelling this power plant, and they're trying to get the IAEA, which is the International Nuclear Watchdog, involved. They want to send representatives in there. And the IAEA has stated that this power plant should be demilitarized and it should be handed back over to Ukraine. Which is pretty ridiculous because that's not how war works. There's something called the spoils of war. You take over an area, and what you've taken over belongs to you. It doesn't belong to the other party that has lost, right? So this is just a desperate attempt by the Ukrainians, but luckily, as I've said in other previous videos, Soviet nuclear power plants, Soviet-era nuclear power plants are built like impregnable fortresses. Basically, they've been built in a way so that even if an airplane, a commercial airliner from 10 kilometers up in the sky, if it were to fall on the nuclear power plant, the power plant would be fine. On the other hand, there are other parts of the power plant that are more vulnerable. There is the depleted uranium, which is stored in less fortified areas. But this shelling has been going on for a while, so I'm guessing that the Russians have beefed up their air defenses, and that they've either moved the depleted uranium to a more fortified area, or they've built a more fortified area, or that they've moved the depleted uranium, which is at risk, out of this area. Now, I don't know why the Ukrainians are doing this, because they're playing with fire. Because let's say they damage the nuclear power plant to the point where it explodes, and radiation starts. Radioactive smoke starts going into the air, starts bursting into the air. Now, let's say that day the wind is blowing north. Well, what's going to happen is that the people in the Russian occupied territory, which is, by the way, the Ukrainians consider them, their own people who are occupied. So even if the wind blows south, they're pretty much creating a situation where they would harm their own people who are under occupation. But anyways, if the wind blows north, it could reach Zaporizhia, which is a major city. It could reach Kryvyi Rih, which is actually Zelensky's hometown. So I don't know why the Ukrainians are doing this, but world leaders need to grow some balls. They need to contact the Ukrainians and tell them, hey, enough is enough. If you do this again, if you keep doing this, we're going to cut all of our supplies, all the help we're giving you, all of our weapons supplies, we're going to cut that. So world leaders need to grow some balls, because this is a very serious situation. Anyways, moving along, there are more bomb symbols which represent artillery and rocket fire on Ukrainian positions by the Russians. Down here, there's the town of Ugledar, and some say the Russians are closing in on Ugledar. Some say this area right here, which kind of has already been taken by the Russians. As you can see, it's a bulge and it's surrounded, so it's not a very good position to defend anyways. But anyways, as we go up, Marinka has been taken by the Russians, but some say the Ukrainians control the western part of the town around this area. So I'm not sure exactly how accurately I've drawn this, but there's different maps, different reports. But anyways, let's move on. What's really important is that the Russians have taken Pisky, the town of Pisky. The Ukrainians fought very heavily. They fought tooth and nail for this town, and there's a reason for that, because right next to this town is Avdiivka. Ever since 2014, ever since Crimea, ever since the Russians took Crimea, the Ukrainians have been fortifying Avdiivka. Avdiivka is something of a natural fortress. It's a very good. It has a lot of natural barriers that make it somewhat of a fortress. That make it a hard nut to crack. You see all this water around here. You see this lake. Then we zoom in. We see this other water here. More water, more streams. Then there's a forest here. And we know that, for defenders, a forest is a dream come true. Streams are natural barriers. There's another little lake here. So naturally, it's a hard nut to crack. But ever since 2014, the Ukrainians have been fortifying the area. They have been they've basically built a network of trenches. They've built a network of underground tunnels and bunkers. They've set traps like mines and whatnot, IEDs, and they've placed some elite units in this town. Some of their most elite units, they've put snipers, ATGM, ambush squads here. Some of the most elite units here. So this is Avdiivka is definitely a hard nut to crack. And what corroborates this is the fact that the Russians haven't been able to really make much progress since the war started 6 months ago. But now, with the taking of Pisky, the Russians have an option. You see, all along the western portion of Avdiivka, all along here, there are these towns dotted all along here, right? What appear to be towns. I mentioned this in this other video, but if you zoom in, these are actually not towns. Like, for example, we zoom in on this first one, Vodian, and I don't see a house, I don't see a building, I just see an intersection. So is this a truck stop? Is it an intersection? I don't know, but it's definitely not a town. And it's the same thing for all of these little what do I call them, like intersections that are dotted along the west. Here we see there, like, what is this? Are there some structures here? Is this a farm? I mean, this is no more than, this is no more than 500 meters by 500 meters, right? So I mean, it's I wouldn't even call it a village. If it's a village, maybe its population like 52, or I don't know. But anyways, my point is, the Russians don't have to go on a frontal assault on Avdiivka. All they have to do is just use their artillery, conduct reconnaissance, use their artillery, take out Ukrainian positions, and slowly go up north. Slowly go up north, secure their flanks. And this is a pro-Ukrainian map, and you see this little ball sticking out. Well, even if this bulge isn't even here anymore, I'm sure the Russians could establish it again. But anyways, the Russians go north, and then the only thing that separates them from encircling this whole area, including Avdiivka, is just 2 miles, right? I mean, so I'm not sure if that's what the Russians are planning, but that's just what makes sense to me. Going up further along, we see the Russians have taken the towns of Dacha and Zaitsev. There's different maps that have different interpretations of how much territory the Russians have taken, but this is what I've drawn right here. They've taken Dacha and Zaitsev. Of course, the situation is fluid. Fighting is ongoing. Sometimes towns change hands every few days. So anyways, Bakhmut, some say that the Russians are a lot deeper in Bakhmut than this map shows, but again, we're not sure. But with those reinforcements that I mentioned earlier, who knows, maybe they will soon storm Bakhmut. Soledar, some say that the Russians are on the verge of taking Soledar. Some say they're halfway through Soledar. This map shows that they're on the outskirts still. But basically, when it comes to Soledar and Bakhmut, notice how the Russians haven't attacked Krasnohora. Well, they don't need to, because all they need to do is they need to take Soledar, right? Then they need to take Bakhmut. Okay, and then Krasnohora will pretty much be the Ukrainians will pretty much have to retreat because it's going to be encircled. The Russians will be able to encircle it pretty easily, or should be able to anyways. So that's that. And then that puts the Russians on the M03 highway, the main link between Bakhmut, Soledar, and Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Of course, there's these other little towns here on the periphery, but it's more tedious to go through each one of these little towns using smaller roads. This is a highway, it goes directly there. Anyways, once the Russians get on the M03, they can expand, right? Use their artillery, reconnaissance, expand, and eventually, as they expand, they could put pressure on Seversk. And some say that the Russians are already, they've established, established a foothold on the outskirts of Seversk, a new foothold, not the previous one from a few weeks ago. Also, Spirne, the Russians definitely control, from what I'm hearing. So, anyways, the Russians can just go up the M03 and put pressure on Seversk, and eventually that's going to lead to an encirclement. As you can see, it's just 2 miles, 4 miles, right? And the Russians have recently made some headway from Izium as well. I'll show you. There are AK symbols symbolizing fighting in this area. So some are saying that the Russians have made some headway finally, which is to be expected because they've been attacking this area for quite a while. So by the time the Russians reach the M103, if they can also establish some kind of line like this, then I mean the Ukrainians will have no option but to leave Seversk. Either leave Seversk or they're going to be surrounded and basically eradicated, destroyed. Now, with the goal of with the Izium front, the main goal, it seems, is to cut off this highway. You see this highway that connects to Sloviansk. Here, I'll get rid of all this. So this highway, which is drawn very thinly, it's very gaunt. This highway connects Sloviansk and Kramatorsk and the rest of this area to the rest of Ukraine. The reason the Ukrainians are fighting so hard here in this area is because if the Russians can cut off this highway, that will be a major blow to the Ukrainians. That will be a major blow to the Ukrainians. Because if, as we previously said, if the Russians can take all this, and if the Russians can come down, and if they can cut off the highway, right? They can cut off this highway, establish a foothold. Then obviously what they're going to do is they're going to start going west, putting pressure on Kramatorsk, right? And they're going to start going along these towns one by one. And there's already news that they're attacking New York. You see these AK symbols here, so they're already trying to attack New York, but let's say within a month or so, they've taken all that, right? Okay. They'll move up these towns, move up this town, move up this town, move up all these little towns. And the thing is, they don't even have to go into Kramatorsk or Sloviansk and fight house to house, because Sloviansk and Kramatorsk are big cities. All they have to do is encircle the area. And if they encircle the area, well, what's left? Eventually, no matter how much food the Ukrainians have stocked up, the Russians can conduct reconnaissance. They can attack the Ukrainian stockpiles of food, stockpiles of weapons. They can play the same trick, establish humanitarian corridors, let all the civilians out, and they can just gradually put pressure on these cities, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, split them in half, put pressure on them, and eventually what's going to happen is that, with constant bombardments and constant pressure and low on morale, low on food, the Ukrainians, just like every other instance, just like previously in Mariupol, I mean, they can say whatever they want, all the bravado, all the machismo they want. In the end of the day, no food, no morale, no bullets. You're gonna have to surrender. Anyways, I'm going to get rid of all these lines. Aside from all that, in the north, the Russians have taken the town. This map isn't showing it, but the Russians have taken the town of Udi, and I believe they've taken these towns as well, right here on the periphery. So I don't know when this map is going to update, but everyone's saying that the Russians have taken Udi, and this is what you see here is more accurate to what the map actually looks like. In other news, what else was I going to talk about? In other news, Daria Dugina. Daria Dugina, the daughter of this philosopher. He's been called Putin's brain because he's very influential with Putin and he's friends with Putin. And he's something of what you would refer to as a Russian hawk, right? He believes in Russian predominance in the region. He believes in Russian expansionism, whatnot. So he's a hawk. He's what you would call a Russian hawk. He's a philosopher. Anyways, a bunch of assassins want to kill him. They rigged his car. As circumstance would have it, his daughter ended up driving his car, and his daughter was a journalist, and she ended up getting killed. And that's been in the headlines as well. So it's quite a tragedy because he's a hawk. Maybe he has a belligerent philosophy, but at the end of the day, he's just an academic, and she was a journalist. So it's quite tragic when you see things like this happen to civilians. And it's quite tragic. This entire war is a tragedy, actually, with all the civilians that have been killed. But anyways, that's all I got for you today, guys. For all of you who have watched till the end, thank you for watching, and have a good day. I'll see you in the next one.